maybe opt for a hotel room when I could have stayed on a couch. So, I mean, yeah, try to evaluate, what cities do you have people you can stay with? Are you comfortable with that? And it'll definitely cut down on some of the costs. Can people pick you up from the airport? Can they drop you off at the interview instead of taking a cab? That'll help.
Weaknesses in your application?
So I have 0 research experience. Like,
I thought you were going to say I have 0 weaknesses.
No, that's not true. I have 0 research experience. Like, literally, the only lab experience I have is from the lab classes that I took here. And I felt at first like that would, take me out of the running from some schools, which I'm sure it did. Was turned away from University of Chicago super fast, and maybe research played a role. I don't know. I should have called them and asked, but I didn't. But I think luckily, especially because we are non-traditional students, I think maybe research is becoming a little less important. So I don't think it hurt me too much. And I was very frank about it too. I said, I don't have research experience. Like, I interviewed at Mayo, for example, and they're a very research-heavy school. And I was just very frank and upfront, and I said, I don't have bench research experience, and I know that a research project is required as a third-year medical student at Mayo, but I am really open to trying new things and open to exploring research, and I'm actually really interested in this topic and interested in research in this area. So I think if you, are willing to open yourself up and tell them, I may be lacking here, but I'm smart and I'm willing to try, that might help a little bit.
One thing I didn't know was, I didn't have any research experience either. And when I interviewed at Case Western, they're very research focused as well. And that definitely came up, but I specifically, on my secondaries to them and in my interview, talked about my my business experience. And I basically played up the fact that, I don't have research experience, but let me tell you about how running some of these projects is the same methodology that I would use in a research project. So I've learned how to start with an hypothesis, investigate it, gather evidence, do so objectively, and, avoid moral hazards and whatnot. And then, come up with a conclusion and present it. So, you especially as a non-traditional student, you probably have something in your experience that you can at least speak to when they're like, oh, you don't have, a lot of patient experience. Like, yes, but let me talk about how I've, dealt with difficult populations in my job, doing whatever. So you probably have some relevant experience, is what I'm saying.
And I think definitely playing on that, if you have experience working in whatever industry it may be, of course you're going to encounter some people that are like, why haven't you wanted to go to medical school forever? But some people are going to be really jazzed that you're an adult and you've had real life experiences and you've worked in a real job and made relationships with people, and I think really play that up. I worked in healthcare IT for an electronic medical record company for 2 years as a project manager prior to doing this post-bac. And I think I was able to talk about, what are the stakeholders in the healthcare industry today? What governmental regulations are playing a role into how physicians practice medicine? Meaningful use or other government reimbursement things that impact how doctors practice medicine and will practice medicine. I think if you have healthcare industry knowledge, they really like to see that. So even if you maybe don't have a ton of clinical experience, play on whatever you've done prior to coming to this post-bac. There are a lot of transferable skills in a lot of jobs, and you really want to play those up.
Yeah, I had pretty shitty grades my first year at undergrad, and you have to address that one way or another. And I think, for me it was like stressing upward trend, and certainly doing well on the post-bac went a long way towards alleviating that. That was one weakness. Another weakness is that since I had taken longer time off, and it wasn't all in one career, I was kind of bouncing around quite a bit between different industries. The most important thing is, and I've heard this over and over again from advisors, is that if you have taken time off, make sure there is some sort of story that leads you to medicine. So dig deep in whatever experience you have and find a way to relate it towards your greater path to medicine. And if you have a good story down, that goes a really long way. And financially, yeah, I probably spent $5,000 or $6,000 on 33 applications.
The weakness of my application was that my background wasn't, it's not from North America, and it's from Iran. And I got my master's degree in Canada at the University of Toronto, and I had to make this up by saying that I've been all around the world. I did my undergraduate degree in Iran, I did my master in Canada, and I'm doing the postbac program actually at Harvard, so I've been everywhere. And I can handle any situation and get along with different people with different cultures and actually turn out in a good way. And I think that was very challenging for me because there are so many schools that they don't like any applicant with undergraduate degree from outside of United States, and they don't actually even consider your application. So it was a bit challenging, but it's over.
And then cost?
And the cost, probably around like 4,000, 5,000.
Going off of what Noah said, like as a non-traditional student, you should definitely have like an elevator pitch of like my story, because not only will it like save you time at cocktail parties when people are like, why are you going into medicine? But it's also like the first question you're gonna get in an interview. It was like I interviewed at 3 different places, and it was the first question I got in every single place. So.
But it really is true that you do stand out as a non-traditional student. Like being in the postbac, you're surrounded by non-trad students, and it becomes kind of normal. But at all my interviews, like I was 6 years older than like everybody else. Everybody else was like, oh, you know, just graduated, or like I'm about to graduate, and like I have this internship lined up for the summer, and I'm going to start med school. You stand out very much, and so use that to your advantage.
Yeah, I was by far the oldest person on my interviews, except for one, Rosalind Frank. There was a guy who was 43. It's like, wow.
Actually, if we can stay on this subject, how did you prepare for your interviews, and what kind of different interview? Like I know you had the mock MMI.
Yeah, I mean HEPS, just throwing that out there, does a wonderful mock MMI thing. Lake is organizing it this semester. It should be in
Next week, not this weekend, the one after it, on Sunday.
So you should all come to that because that's great. I'm a big proponent of doing something over and over and over again so that when you actually get to it, you don't freak yourself out and it all feels very routine. But yeah, so did the mock MMI. That was great. Definitely SDN has common interview questions. Like people go in and they write down like what questions they got asked in interviews at that school. So I would definitely, I would when I got an interview at a school, I would go to SDN, look at what the interview questions were, and sort of distill like 10, and then I would prepare answers to those. So, I mean, I didn't memorize anything. That's probably not a good idea. You don't want to sound robotic. But it meant that when I got a question that like, okay, so you get a question from out of left field. You have probably seen it on SDN. You're able to be like, oh, you know what? Let's talk about that ethical conundrum. Other than that, I just practiced with some of my friends. We would just, take these common interview questions and bounce them off of each other. Yeah, that was
I guess for interview preparation, I definitely reread my secondaries. I explored the website. I wrote down a list of questions from the website because a lot of it is, the interview is as much about them finding out if, you're a good fit for them, but also if you finding out if you feel good there. And so it's important to look at the website and ask those questions. And when you're at the interview, ask the questions to yourself, can I see myself here? So I probably spent maybe 30 minutes to an hour and a half the night before each of my interviews. Depending on as I got into later interviews, it took less time because I felt like it was more routine. But just rereading things, thinking about a little internally, why did I apply here? Why do I want to go here? And then some of I think the questions and that you'll want to ask on interview day, you'll find out organically from your experience within the interview. You'll be on the interview day and you'll find questions that you want to ask or that you can bring to your faculty interview based on what you just heard a half hour earlier or something. So yeah.
Definitely keep your eye out during the interview, because you will learn a lot about the school, and you'll learn a lot from the students, from the faculty you talk to, and you can definitely, find out, oh, this is an important issue at this school, like research is big here, or they seem to be really hitting community service really hard, so maybe I should bring that up or talk about, play that up in the interview.
Yeah, definitely want to emphasize, go to Student Doctor Network, go to the interview feedback section and look at the questions people have been asked. I found that extremely helpful, and I've got many questions that I saw in advance. I did some mock interviews, probably with people that knew me better than I should have gone to for mock interviews, but still very helpful just to talk through a lot of the questions. Actually physically speaking the words is really important so you don't get tongue-tied. I think the biggest things that helped me in my interviews, one was have a really good tell me about yourself answer, like really, really good. Refine it, make it interesting. It's such an annoying question, but at the same time, it is like the perfect opportunity to set the stage for lots of fun questions that the interviewer can then ask you. So then you can almost like anticipate what questions you'll get because you're setting the stage so clearly for them. And keep your tell me about yourself short, keep it like 30 seconds, 45 seconds. And then also have good questions for your interviewer. Two that I kind of fell back on if I didn't have anything actually substantive. By the way, don't ask anything that you could have found out on the internet, because they know that and they know you're just trying to ask a question to ask for the sake of asking a question. So have like something interesting to ask about. So my fallbacks were, is it out of the ordinary for a student to just like cold email any one of the physician faculties to like ask like, hey, could I pick your brain over coffee or something? That kind of was a way for me to gauge how receptive and how like integrated the faculty were with the student involvement. And then also, one thing that I think a lot of my interviewers weren't really expecting, I asked almost all of them, usually this was my last question, by the way, do you have any advice for someone about to embark on a career in medicine? And I think a lot of them kind of were like, huh, that's an interesting question, and I hadn't really been asked that before, so it's just a good way to extend it. Feel free to use those.
That's nice. I definitely recommend the SCN go through the school's website and make sure you know the school very well, and actually practice the questions with yourself or someone, as my other colleague said, and also make sure that the questions that there are some questions that why do you want to do medicine, or why do you want to become a doctor or dentist, and make sure you're not just repeating your essay. You have like new stuff that you actually wanted to tell your interviewer, and you're not just repeating everything in your actually application, because they have them in front of them, and that's it.
Also to play off that, I think often in interviews you'll be with 20 other interviewees or something, and you may go around the room at some point and introduce yourself and say something unique about yourself. If you can, find something interesting about you that may set you apart from the other people in the room. Oftentimes for me it was just that I grew up in a small farming community in Wisconsin, and I learned how to set and strip tobacco when I was 7. Something non-academic maybe. Maybe you really like hip hop dance, or I don't know, something that the person in the room on the admissions committee later can be like, oh, the girl who knows how to strip tobacco, that girl, I think you want to put something unique to your name, and you can kind of gauge what the other people in your interview, what they might say, and then try to think of something that's like maybe a little bit different. And it can be something really small, just something that's unique. We've all got them. So.
I talked about food. I make really good ribs.
Yeah,
Everyone
yeah.
knows rib. Something else to say about it. Slipped my mind. Yeah.
Oh, and write thank you notes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't at first. This was something I did not know. until too late, potentially. But I think, I don't know, you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I still don't really know, but I think it's kind of expected, right?
Yes, yeah, it is.
Definitely.
And when I went to my first sets of interviews, my thought was, like, this is their job. They're interviewing me. Like, why am I thanking them for interviewing me, right? Like, they're on the faculty. But then I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, it'll put a little personal, touch to it. Write a handwritten note. Say something specific about your talk with them. So you're going to probably send it to the actual faculty interviewer, the person you interviewed with, or your student interviewer, and you'll say something like, I really enjoyed our talk about X. So it's not just like a thank you for your time letter. It says something a little bit more personal. And yeah, I didn't know going into it that was expected until probably like a quarter of the way through my interviews.
I think with MMIs, it's maybe a little bit less expected.
I didn't do it for any MMIs.
Yeah,
because you don't know.
You aren't
you're
like having a conversation.
Going really fast.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I didn't write. I wrote thank you notes to Rush, but then I didn't do the one the MMI at Roswell Franklin, and then Case Western they made the decision so quickly.
Yeah. And again, you can gauge it. Like, I didn't, from some of the schools that I didn't write letters to, I got accepted. So I don't think it's the end all be all, but I think it is starting to be like, it's starting to be expected.
Oh, one thing that I had going into interviews is I had like a couple of like short vignettes about like just short little stories about a patient experience, or like one time I was working in the infusion ward and it was late at night and there was only one patient and we sat and talked for like an hour and a half about her life and how she ended up in Boston, and it was just this wonderful affirming moment. Just little short vignettes like that, you can always fall back on them, and it's also like it makes it very clear, especially for me. I just always wanted to emphasize that like I know what it's like on a very personal level to deal with medicine day in, day out. It's also like you can't think of anything to say. You're like, let me tell you a story, and while I'm telling it, I can think of an answer to your question.
So the MMI is multiple mini interviews. Can you describe it briefly in case someone doesn't know what it is?
Oh yeah, what you'll do is you have somewhere, I think at NYU they had as many as like 10 different rooms. In mine they had 6 different rooms, and then you doubled up on the last one, so it's 7 separate interviews, and you have maybe between 5 to 8 minutes in each room. And the questions, you have like a question on the door, you get like a minute to read it, and then you walk in and discuss it with the faculty member for like 5 to 8 minutes. They sound really intimidating. Everyone I know who's done them actually likes them a lot, to a certain extent. I don't know if that's your experience, but I know I really liked him. Sam really liked him.
I think they're the best thing in the world.
Yeah, I really like them too. Because if you get an interviewer and that's your one interviewer and that's like the one person who gets to talk with you and gets to form an opinion on you, if that person doesn't like you, just personally or something, for whatever reason, they don't like your face or your hair or something, then you're really screwed. And I sometimes I got the impression that there was an interviewer, there was an interviewing people, and I was like, I want to talk with them because they seem energetic and go-getter, and I feel like when they're in the room making a decision, this person will be an advocate. Whereas like the person that I did end up interviewing like seemed a little bit more subdued and wasn't didn't seem like I was their favorite person or anything. So I really like them. One thing that I want to say about the MMI, and you guys should all come to the mock MMI because it's great preparation. We go more in depth about preparing for MMIs. You're gonna have people say that you can't prepare for MMIs, and that's totally untrue. There are a lot of similar questions. The ethical conundrums that are proposed are usually there's things that you shouldn't say, and there are things that you should say. There are definitely like things that you should know that you shouldn't say that will throw up red flags. And there is a lot of reuse of maybe not the same questions, but the same types of questions, and understanding what to expect and how you're expected to answer those questions, I think is a huge leg up. So come to the mock MMI, and also like do your research online. There's a lot of good examples that have like the rubric that they use to evaluate you. That way when your interviewers look at you, like what boxes they're ticking off. But I love my MMI. It was great. It was a lot of fun actually.
Do you guys have any questions about MMI or traditional interview stuff?
guess I can ask. What, like, was there a question where you thought you weren't prepared for that, like, surprised you and you felt not prepared to answer?
Yes. There was one. So at my Mayo interview, it was my second. So you have 2 faculty interviews, and at the end of my second one, the gentleman who was interviewing me said, "If we accepted you today, would you come?"
Yes.
And
That's the correct answer.
yeah, no, and I was taken aback, and I said, you know, I also have to think about my fiance, and we need time to figure out job prospects. And he's very resourceful, so I do not doubt his ability to find a job here. And so that being said, yes, I would. But I was like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that one. But I think it's okay to take some time and be like, huh, you know, yeah, I would. Rather than being like, yes, no, or no, I don't know. I don't even know if I was gonna say no, but yeah, that surprised me.
The only ones that stand out to me is one of my interviewers asked me both, what do you think is the greatest obstacle or hindrance to outpatient care and then also to inpatient care? And it kind of threw me off. I came up with like some like okay answer, but I had to think about it. Caught me off guard.
I think one of the questions it was not a very usual question. Was if you want to change the world, like one thing in the world, what will you do? And it didn't make sense, my answer, but I said I'm gonna probably remove like countries, like geographic border, and because like human nature is in a way that we all want to be in one united community, and I don't know how I came up with that, but yeah, that was the only question that I wasn't sure how to answer it. Something I wanted to add about the thank you letters is that what I found is some schools have different cultures. Some schools really like it that you send thank you letter to every person who interviewed you, and call them, ask them question, make sure everything is okay. And some of the schools, they don't like it to bother them and call them 1,000 times and make sure that my application is okay. Is everything okay? Do you receive everything? Or where is my application standing? So after your interview, you get the feel of how is this school, and if they like you to ask so many questions, or if they just want you to send one thank you letter to maybe just the admission office and thank you everyone generally. You're gonna get the sense from your interview.
I think the only question that really put me aback was not so much the specific question, but the ferocity with which some questions were asked. I had one interview. Thankfully, it was meant to be like a really brief interview, and then we had a longer interview, and this was just to get 2 opinions on it. But I got into the room with this doctor, and they were like, so why would you want to do medicine? You had a career, why are you here? And I was like, whoa. And it definitely set me on my heels for the entire interview, because I was just I didn't realize this was so combative. So I would definitely be prepared for different tenors of people. Most interviewers are super nice people, and they just want to get to know about you. But you may get someone who really wants to quiz you down. So don't be surprised if that happens. One other thing I want to say, just real quick about the MMIs, is you're going to get a lot of tricky questions. One question that one specific one I got was and this is a common MMI question. You accidentally killed a child by moving a decimal place on in medicine, and now you have to talk to their family. Now, how would you talk to their family? And so I had prepared for questions like this. So I had a spiel, and I gave it, and then I still had 2 minutes left. And that's okay. You can just be done. You don't have to keep talking and maybe fall over yourself or put your foot in your mouth. You can just be, this is what I would do, and that's it. How are you today?
Something else about interviews, I think it's the best to be yourself. Don't be very robotic, as like Rachel said, and like I think they appreciate, they understand like that you're having stress and you're stressed, and if you be yourself, I think they like it more than someone that prepares themselves a lot.
I like always try to make a joke or two. In the
Yeah,
first,
exactly,
always,
yeah.
just like put yourself at ease, put them at ease, and talk like people.
I have a question. You mentioned something about a question when they asked you about inpatient and outpatient care.
Mhm.
What did you like do to prepare for those types of questions? Like, did you read? I don't know, from
Yeah.
a specific website or some books? Or
I made sure to like just do like a quick review of like what the Affordable Care Act is. I watched just like some YouTube videos about like why is healthcare in the U.S. so expensive? What are some things there? Something about like health disparities in the country. Just have some idea of our country's healthcare system, and that will usually be enough. They don't expect you to be an expert, but they just want to hear something relevant.